Hey everyone, this is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of That Tutorials and More. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss out on any new videos, and check the video description for a link to the That mobile learning library app. Inside of our mobile app, you can access all of our tutorials quickly and easily in our neatly organized content libraries, or choose to subscribe for access to exclusive content and communities, including our Affinity Masterclasses and early access to new tutorials. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to sublimate a 40-ounce Stanley style tumbler. Now, we know that the Stanley style tumblers, we'll call them name brand tumblers from here on out, are all of the rage right now. But when you can create something custom and unique for your audience, it is just that much sweeter. The 40-ounce cups are such a great reusable option, and we have the ability to print them for really any aesthetic you can imagine. So I'm going to show you how to print this. We're going to be using our convection oven for this. Due to the size, this particular product does not fit into any type of tumbler press or mug press. So you will need a convection oven or a 3D vacuum press to successfully sublimate this item, along with shrink wrap, which was included with ours from Johnson's Plastics Plus. So let's go ahead, turn things around. We'll get our measurements, have a look at our tumbler, and set things up. And then we'll talk more about how to print, press, and profit your 40-ounce tumbler. All right, so here's a look at our 40-ounce tumbler. We get this nice size box. It does come with the straw. Some of the 40-ounce tumblers have a tapered bottom. This one is straight. So for those of you who don't have the functions for tapering with whatever design program you're using, if you're not using Affinity, or if you just don't like dealing with trying to line up those tapers, this is great. So we have this section and this section, both of which can be printed. This can be printed as well, but if you look, see how it's domed? That poses a bit of an issue with getting a transfer flush on this. We always have to remember that when it comes to sublimation, your transfer needs to be flush to the surface and able to have constant pressure. Now we're using shrink wrap with this item, so the pressure isn't really the issue, but the fact that the paper is not going to be flush because of this double bevel, because we have it curving this way, we have it curving this way, and it's also tapered. This is a similar issue to what we run into with the lower half of wine glasses, because they have the same effect going on, and that's why we can't really print all the way down. Technically you can with a lot of finagling, but we always want to remember that the time we put into a product has to be equivalent to the money that we are going to make. So a little bit different top than the Stanley tumblers, but that's all right. Nice and big. With these ones, we're going to unscrew the handle. So this does come with its own template for various programs, and I have put together an Affinity template which is available for free. The link is below the video. I always like to make sure we get our measurements beforehand. This is just a good step. It's a good step to do no matter what, because you never know if you might have purchased a template that might be slightly off. Sometimes there's a little bit of differences in manufacturing, and those things do make a difference in your actual design size output. So we'll do our bottom part first. We're going to line it up right to that little edge right there. And we're going to go with 3 inches. And so technically this is 3 1/8. But notice how it's starting to round right here. We want to be cautious of that because we don't want our transfer to wrap around that, because we'll get warbling, which we don't like. We want to have a nice crisp line. So we'll stick with 3 inches for that, just to make sure we've got the right amount of space to fill this area and still look good. So we've got 3 inches for our height, and then my tape measure is all tangled up here. We have got, see if I can turn it so you guys can see it. There we go. So we have got 9 3/8 for that circumference of the bottom. So we'll go ahead and write that down. And let's grab those top measurements. So again, we're going to line it up right where it starts to curve. And we have got 5.5. I'll just wrap this around here. 5.5 by 12.5. Okay. Now all we need to do to get this ready to attach our design is to remove our handle. So you're just going to want a Phillips head screwdriver for that. A relatively small one is a good idea, and we'll just unscrew that from the bottom. So we'll do that when we get our transfer here in just a second. Let's go ahead and set that up in Affinity Designer.
I have Affinity Designer 2.0 open on my Windows PC. Everything that we'll be doing today will work in the version 1 of Affinity Designer, and the only difference between this and the Mac is that you might notice some differences in the layout of the program. Overall, the steps are the same, and navigating following this video should be easy. We want to start by opening up the template that we have downloaded. So if you haven't downloaded the template, follow the link, download that template, unzip the file, and save the .af template into your designated templates folder that you have created on your computer in your file explorer. For me, that is on OneDrive. I highly recommend saving your templates to a cloud drive just so they're easy to access, especially if you change devices or if you update your software or anything like that happens. It's just nice to have them in one place where you don't have to re-download them or anything like that. So we will come to File and then New or New Document, and you're going to come to that Template section in the Document Setup panel. If you haven't linked your folder where you keep your templates to Affinity, you can do that by selecting the Add Folder button or icon. You can see I've already linked mine. I just named it Affinity Templates, and you can see right here that mine is actually saved on OneDrive. That makes it easy, again, accessible no matter what happens. So anytime I create a new template, I just save it right in here, and then all you do is open up the program and you will see your templates here. So I'm going to scroll down to that template that I've provided for the 40-ounce Stanley's tumbler that's straight and click Create. Now you'll notice on this template that we have 4 different line sets, or 2 different line sets, 4 different lines. The black ones that are bold are the bleed line, and the blue one is the print line. So the blue one is set to the measurements that we got, and this should be universal. You can see just by clicking on it that it is set to the correct size measurements. Always double check. Anytime you get a template anywhere, double check that your measurements line up with the measurements that are showing in that transform panel. We want to make sure that we have a little extra though, because we don't always get our cutting perfect. A lot of people really obsess about having a seamless look tumbler. This is genuinely not something to concern yourself about. The craft industry makes a far bigger deal about a perfect seamless look than a customer does. Customers don't care, largely because 95% of what they purchase in the store has a seam. If it is all the way printed, it has a seam, unless it's an object that is pad printed or an object that is hydro dipped. And objects that are hydro dipped or even UV printed don't have the washability that sublimation items do. It's just important to keep in mind that there are different capabilities within different types of printing. Because you may not get the perfect straight line if you print your design exactly at measurement, you want to make sure you have that little bit of extra. So we are going to make sure that our design is clipped into that bleed line space. So we have just a little bit. It's not a lot. It's about a 1/16 of an inch all the way around to make sure that we are going to get that full printed look, and we're not going to waste paper in the process of it all. All we need to do is import our design. So I'm using a design from Debbie Does Design. I can simply select my Place Image tool and come to where I have downloaded that design. And I'm going to hold down my Control key so I can select both of those at the same time. I believe you would use Command on a Mac to do that. And then click Open. Now, because this is made for a 40-ounce tumbler, it should be pretty close to the correct size that we need. So when we see that downward arrow with the portal, we're just going to one-time click it, and it will import those at full size. In a lot of the videos, I tell you to click and drag, and that's because we're resizing the design to fit a specific substrate. For something that is product specific, like it's designed for a garden flag or a door hanger or a tumbler, we want to do the one click because that will import it at the actual size and we can tweak it as necessary from there. I want to look to my layers panel and make sure that my top layer is in between my two top sections and my bottom layer is in between my bottom two, and also adjust them on my screen. So first of all, with that bottom layer selected, I'm just going to move it on down. And then I'm going to drag it in my layers panel in between the bottom print line and the bottom bleed line. This is just to make life easier as we're navigating our layers panel. Then I'll click on the top one and I will get this lined up as well. So what I want to do is line this up with my bleed line. Let me just zoom in so you guys can see this a little bit better. See how you can see the edge there? We're just trying to get it as close to that as possible. Now, when we do this, we also want to be mindful of where the blue line falls in the bottom of the design. So if this is our tumbler, the top of our tumbler is this edge. And then this is where we're going to have that section that domes and like slants downwards. We don't want to cut off our design with a harsh line like this. It just doesn't look as good. So all we're going to do is, using our arrow key, is just use the upward arrow until this hits the line of our blue print line. So now I have that right in line there. This part up here will get cut off a little bit when we trim our design after we clip it all in here. That's okay. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're trying to use any kind of pre-made, pre-sized design for a substrate is that instead of doing this method where we create the best sizing and then clip it and, just clip it strategically that we don't lose a lot from the design, they try and do something like this. This absolutely skews the end result of the design. It does not look as good. You definitely don't want to do that. So I just undid those steps that I just did. Let me move that right back up. So our goal is to always strategically crop a design, not skew it. All right, once we have this in place, we are going to click and drag this into the bleed line layer. So all you do is click and drag, hold down on that icon, drag your mouse so that your cursor is touching the name of that layer that we want to clip into, and it is now part of that. Next, you can come to this top print line and just select this little circle there or the eyeball if you're in version 1. And for the bleed line layer, we just want to get rid of that black outline so that that doesn't print and end up transferring onto our tumbler. Come to your color panel, make sure that the open circle is selected, choose the no fill option, and you're all set. Now we're just going to repeat the same steps on the bottom. So we start with that bottom design. We're going to shrink this on down so that it lines up with our bottom bleed line layer, and then we're going to use our downward arrow this time to bring that down so that it touches that blue print line so that we don't have anything weirdly cut off. Perfect. And then click and drag till the cursor touches that bottom bleed line. Come to that bottom print line, hide the visibility, come to that bottom bleed line again, come to our color panel, choose that open circle, and choose no fill. Now this is ready for us to print. We can either export this file as a PNG and then open up our print page, or we can just copy and paste it, which is what I'm going to do. So I am going to click and drag across my screen to get those two layers, right click and copy. Now I want to open up a new document. Our document should be the page size that we plan on printing on in the orientation that our paper feeds into the printer. For a tumbler, for a 40-ounce tumbler, you can print your design on 11 by 17 paper very easily. For the Epson SureColor F570 Pro printer that I have, it has 17-inch wide rolled media. So most of you who have printers that can print 11 by 17 are going to have your page in portrait because that's how your printer feeds the paper in. But because I am using rolled paper, it's actually wider. It is the 17 inches is the width of it, and then the height can be whatever height I make it up to the full length of the row. So that is horizontal. Just keep in mind it's a little bit different on mine. This is if you're using the Epson SureColor F570 Pro. You can choose to get 11 by 17 paper and feed it in through the sheet feeder. I just decided it was easier to have the roll because I feel like ultimately you get less paper waste. Underneath our color tab, we want to make sure that color format is set to RGB/8. Color profile is set to sRGB IEC 61966-2.1. Again, that is the most up-to-date color profile for Sublimation, but if you have a Mac that's having some color discrepancy issues, then opt for the Adobe RGB 1998. I always like to remind you that the ICC profile for your specific ink is selected during your printer setup when you go to actually print the document, not during document setup right now. These settings are universal, your printer settings are not. Once you have everything set, click Create. Now you can right click and paste that file that we just copied from our other tab, or if you had exported it as a PNG, then you will select the Place Image tool and choose that from your File Explorer, wherever you had saved it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just line this up in the center, and now it is ready to send this off to print. We will come to File and then Print. Choose your printer from the drop-down menu. Come to the Properties tab. Now this is where you would select any color correction settings that you have and your ICC profile if that is relevant to your Sublimation printer. For the Epson SureColor F570 Pro, all we have to do is make sure that our paper sizes are all correct and we've selected the right source for our paper. That's what I love about this printer. There's no extra work required. It's just file, print, choose your paper size, and off it goes. So we can see that this is the default. It's just set to letter size, which is not what we have. So I'm going to come to my drop down here underneath settings, and I am going to choose my 17-inch by 12-inch roll because that's what I grabbed. Make sure that you always look at the orientation of this page right here. So this one, it says that it's in landscape, but notice that it's taller than it is wider. That's because of how I entered in the original measurements. So I'm just going to select portrait so that it is actually 17 inches by 12 inches high. And then I'm going to click in OK. Now my source is the rolled paper, my rolled paper width. I'm going to come to this drop down, choose the 17-inch option. And for my media type, I have rigid since this is going on a tumbler. I don't need to have a print preview, so I always have that deselected and I click OK. There's a print preview right here in Affinity. I can verify everything is good. We will send this off to print by clicking OK.
As I mentioned before, the first thing we got to do is unscrew that handle. We don't want to put the handle in there. We of course don't want it to melt. So all you're going to do is take your screwdriver, stick it right on in there. Remember righty tighty lefty loosey, or for maybe those of you who have never used a screwdriver, that's the correct way to determine which way to go. Make sure we set them somewhere where we're not going to lose them. By the way, if you don't own a screwdriver, I have like 5 of these. They're just 98 cents at Walmart. Although they might be a little bit more now because inflation. There we go. That one was a little bit tight. If you have a smaller screwdriver, that can work as well. Also, it's a little harder to do this over the camera. All right, there we go. I couldn't really see it properly on the camera. And then you'll just pull that right off. Just make sure when you put it back in, you do get it in the correct slots, because if you don't, the screws will not reach it. I learned that the hard way. All right, so we've got our transfer. I've already gone ahead and cut this. Now we did cut this, or we did print this just a hair bigger. That way we would know that we had enough to overlap and enough to trim if we needed to. So I can see right here, I need to trim that just a little bit, which is fine. We'll check the bottom piece as well. And yes, I need to trim the bottom one just a little bit more as well. So I went ahead and trimmed about 1/32 of an inch off of both of them. That was all I really needed. So we can have a nice fill. So we're just gonna go ahead and wrap it around, get it all lined up. Make sure that we do have it placed properly. On this one, the design is solid at the bottom and fades up. The top part will be lined up here and come down. I think that designs like this really are more aesthetically appealing for this kind of project because it doesn't make it so obvious. There isn't like a harsh line right here, which I think just looks better. We always want to double check to make sure we've got a nice paper to substrate seal, like it's nice and flush. There's no air gaps. And we'll go ahead and do this top part here. Same thing, line it up. Now you do want where your paper is going to overlap or the seam's going to be where the handle is. This is going to allow you to hide any imperfections if you have them, but also it's just easier because you're going to rip that paper just a little bit to overlap it, and you don't want it to drastically impact the print. So this prevents that. And because we have that little overlap, we've got enough to cover it right there. So we'll get one good piece of tape there. And then all we're gonna do is just rip this just a little bit and bring it on down and then tape it. Apparently we're getting double pieces of tape. That's all right. And we'll do the same thing over here. Once again, making sure we've got a nice good seal. I think this part right here is not quite where I want it to be. Now we're going to go ahead and add our shrink wrap. Now this is the shrink wrap size that was recommended by Johnson's Plastics, but I found that because it's not quite long enough to wrap around the edges, it can shrink into itself, which is not really what we want. So we're actually going to cut this. We're going to cut this into 2 pieces. I'm going to cut it right about there. I'm actually going to do this on the paper cutter just so I can get a straight cut. Now Johnson's Plastics has shrink wrap in probably a dozen different sizes for all different types of projects. This is, I believe, the right size. It's the one that I've been using, so that's the one we're going for. So we'll go ahead and stick that around and we'll shrink it up. When you have one like this, I recommend pulling it in tight and sort of folding it over like this. That way you can keep it tight as it shrinks. I always do the edge part first. All right, make sure you got all those air bubbles out. You don't need to go crazy, you know, because it's going to shrink more in the oven, but we want to do as good of a job as we can. And then slide that right on over. Same thing, I'm going to hold it and I'm going to make sure I do my top edge first. I'll come down and do this bottom part. And then through the middle. Now this is a very low heat gun from Amazon. It's one of my personal favorites to use, just because it is low heat and it was fairly cheap. But you can see we've got a nice seal. Anytime we do tumblers, we always want to double check for any wrinkles in our paper. Everything's looking good there around our edges. So we are ready to put this in our convection toaster oven. Now, the convection toaster oven that I have that replaced my other one was bigger. But this one that we've been using for a while now is a little bit smaller. And what you want to pay attention to when you're doing this for yourself is those grates there. When we put our tumbler in, we want to make sure it is in between those, not resting against it, because if it's resting against it, it could end up burning the tumbler. We don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that in. I'll make sure I get it all the way in there without burning my hand. Okay. So I have this set, mine runs a little cool. So it says that it's at 400, but it's about 385. And we are going to do 385 for 10 minutes. But at the 5-minute mark, I'm going to flip it. Once we are all cooled off, it is time to remove our shrink wrap and design. Now, if you're ever unsure and you're doing something that is a stainless steel item, a good way to know that your design has fully transferred is the fact that you can see it through the paper. I will tell you though that if you use those papers that are thicker, that are like 120 GSM, or the ones that say no blowout paper needed, as great as that is, it hinders your ability to be able to see if the design is done. I personally don't like using thicker papers for that reason, whether it's being able to see a design through the paper when I put it on a textile, or if it's just to give me a good baseline for something to be finished on an item like this. I just prefer the thinner papers all around, plus faster ink release. So we'll go ahead and peel that back. Usually try and get some kind of big pieces, but it doesn't always go that way. If you have a short patience limit, you can take a box cutter, slide it in between the paper and the shrink wrap and get yourself a bigger piece there. If you're careful, you can run it down the tumbler, like run it like this, but you have to be careful, because if you're not careful, you will end up cutting into your coating, which is definitely not what we want. Okay. If you've seen my straight tumbler video, I do usually on the seam line there, I do the tape down it. I don't know why I didn't think to do that, but it does make it easier to pull off because it's kind of the worst when it starts breaking apart. But there's our design. It's like a spooky, marbly, fall floral kind of vibe. I love it. This one's from Debbie Does Design. And let's go ahead and put our handle on. Screw holes should be facing down. And there we go. Once again, righty-tighty. All right, once you got those screwed back in, you are ready for the lid and the straw. You can put it right back in its box. It is ready to sell as is or as part of some type of product set. This is a great item to do as a gift set. You can do like teacher items. You can stuff it full of stuff because it's so big. You can just pair it as part of other items. Great for all year round, really popular tumbler design style right now in terms of the shape. So sky's the limit. There are so many different designs you can choose from available on various platforms. Be sure to check out Creative Fabrica as well. I saw tons of 40-ounce tumbler designs there. And once again, the link to this one from Debbie Does Design. She's got a dozen or so that are absolutely stunning. Be sure to check her out. You can find more about how to market this product successfully and the types of aesthetics that sell through the marketing guide available exclusively in the Sub That Learning Library app. The links for everything we used today are in the caption of our tutorial. Be sure to check that out. As always, thank you for joining us.